2025 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the live stream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can simply ask questions in the live chat field, or you could send questions to me in advance by going to Club Cubase, sending an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could specify a few things, it's always helpful, like which version of Cubase you're running. Also, if you could indicate which level, so if it's so let's say if you're running Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, or versions 12, 13, 14, and which operating system, that information is usually helpful to answer questions. Also, we should have an index several hours after the live stream ends pinned to the top of the comments field with timestamps so you can navigate to particular questions easily. And if you wanted to search for topics, we've covered over 40,000 different topics. If you wanted to search for different topics on live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com. We want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating a wonderful website. We have two people that serve as moderators, Jazz Dude and Agent K. They're not Steinberg employees. They just do it out of the goodness of their heart to make it a better community experience, and we want to give special thanks to them. Also, a special extra kudos goes to Jazz Dude for his efforts with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful resource of information for the Steinberg community. And so once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products in the United States, and I'm the host today. I'm presenting from just outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're on live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. It's always fascinating to see where people are from different parts of the world. And with that, we'll go ahead and begin. All right, so we see Tim K joining from Zeist in the Netherlands. His cat Buddy is waving a paw hello to my cat Steven and Stella, Mark Rabin's dog, and other pets that are nearby. Yes, I think my cat, yes, he's asleep behind me as we do the live stream. All right, we see Jazz Dude shared a couple of different links on building your own drum sounds and never rebuild a Cubase mix session again from Chris Lim. At least the never rebuild your mix session again. All right, we see Jan from Cubase Index. We have Michael Marshall just saying, sending greetings from Somerset, UK. Thanks for joining us. We have Uno Memento joining from Finland. Thanks for letting me know you got the mute issue figured out that we're discussing in the last live stream. So Uno had inadvertently had mute automation on one of the tracks. So it's causing the problem. All right, we see Stefan joining from Sweden. We have Flyv's Vince joining from Winnipeg, Canada. Tony Trunzo joining us from Australia. All right, and we see Soren, who's checking in from Sweden, who says, I'll probably ask a couple of tricky questions. So hopefully I could have a couple of tricky answers for those questions. All right. Always wonderful to see Jazz Dude on. We have Balsa checking in from Montenegro. Thanks for joining us. All right. We have Bratman Studio Rick joining us from Whittier, California. From Uptown Whittier. All right. We see John Costigan joining from Kenosha, Wisconsin. This is the open air steam bath. So, all right. So we see Raw Justice Hip Hop checking in from Capitol Heights, Maryland. He's gone to the water park in Arlington, Virginia today at the fountain from 5:30 to 8 p.m. So not too far from me. All right. So we see from a question from this Ninja Squared who asks, when I name my track, how can I get the event on the track automatically to have the same name? Okay, so let's say if I come here, like my track here is called Baccello, and I have the event is called Halion Sonic 01. So if we want to come over here, if we just kind of double click in the name field, I'm going to hold down the command or the control key and then hit enter. And then the event will automatically be renamed. So just kind of double click so that you could actively type in the name field, hold down control, command while that's highlighted, and keep that held down and then hit the enter key, and then the events on that track will carry over, or the selected events will automatically carry over for the track name will be used for the event name. All right, so we see from Soren, it says to separate the drum machine programming, it's a matter of using separate outs, right? Yeah, so let's go ahead and take a look. So let's say if we have our drum machine here, so we'll just open this up. So let's say if we have, I'll just generate a quick pattern here. All right, so I will, let me just solo this. All right, so let's say I'll just, let me just switch this to, we'll make it a little more interesting pattern here. All right, so let's say now we want to take our drum machine and set it to different outputs. So right now everything is going out of a stereo out in our mix console. But if we wanted to do more extensive mixing, we come over to the drum machine. And now we can say, okay, I just want to take my kick here. And if we go to, I think it's under group, here we could set our outputs. So let's say I want my kick to go to output 2. Let me just solo that. And my snare to go out of output 3, and hi-hat to output 4. And now when we go to and let's come over here to the mix console, and we will just so now if I wanted more control, I could just come directly over here and apply channel EQ or channel effects. So let's say so now, so again, once we go to the drum machine, all you'd have to do is just come right over here again. So we'll just go, we'll select this, go to the groups, and then we could do outputs, but we also have different effects that we could utilize inside the drum machine as well. So if I want to come here and add reverb, if we wanted to edit the reverb or the delay, we have different effects for reverb and delay that we could use. But if you wanted to use more dynamics plugins, then just simply go to the groups tab, and then you could route to the 32 stereo outs. All right, always wonderful to see the artist known as Love, and he wants everyone to hit the like button. All right, so we have Talarista de Graffiti joining. We see Val joining from, his wife 42 joining from Vienna, Austria. All right, and we see Benny joining from Sweden. And we have Question Music. It says, music is straight or strit from Cape Town, South Africa. Thanks for being a part of our community. All right, Balsa has a question, and it is, when using import track from project to import a sampler track, does Cubase also import the audio file that's in the sampler track to the new project pool? All right, so let's take a look. So let's say we have a sampler track here. I'll just make one. Okay, so I will quickly just come over here. Let's save it as a preset. All right, so we're going to make a sampler track. This, let me make sure it's not muted. That would help. Okay, so now when we play our sampler track, okay, so we have this particular sample. I'm going to save it as a track preset. So we will come over here and say, okay, we will save as a track preset. All right, and we'll call this Balsa. Okay, I'm going to do an entirely new project. So we'll create empty. We'll put it into our July 11th folder. I'll add a new folder here called Balsa. Okay, so now I want to import that sampler track. So we'll say, okay, let's go to our user presets, track preset sampler. So we'll see Balsa. So I drag that over, and now we could play as expected, but the sample will be in its original folder location. So let's come over here to our pool window just to verify. All right, so we look at the audio file that's in the sampler track, and we can see that this is, the path isn't, it's in our previous project folder. Now if I want, excuse me, I had to sneeze. And now if I want to come over here and make this as part of this project folder, so I'm going to save this project. So we'll say save the project. We'll call it Balsa. Now, if we want this folder, so we have the sampler track that was created in the other project. The audio file is now in the original location, and if we want it into the current project location, if we come here to media and we say prepare archive, so external files will be copied to the working directory. We'll say proceed, and now we'll say okay. And now when we look, our path for the project here was automatically placed into the Balsa folder. So once you have the sampler track imported, if you want that audio file to be in the project folder, simply go to your media menu and choose Prepare Archive, and that will move the sampler track that's referencing the audio file from anywhere else, and we'll copy that audio file into the current project folder. So let me know if that makes sense for you also. Okay, so we have a question from Dallas LaRue from Las Vegas. Says, I imported a song in Cubase that was 110 tempo. I set the tempo at 92 and put it in musical mode. It plays perfect. It plays a perfect tempo, but nothing lines up to the grid. I can't line it up with Groove Agent. Okay, so let's say if I have a file here. I'll import an audio file. Okay, let me just. All right, so let's say we have this. And now let me just open up the projects quickly here, just. So we could replicate what you're going through here. Okay, so our original tempo is 88 beats a minute here in this particular project. So I'm going to, let's say our basis for our tempo is 88 beats a minute. So now as we play this project, we may have to. Okay, so make sure that the audio file itself has let me just take it off the loop. All right, so now again when we kind of play this back, so our file here is at 88 beats a minute, but we have to make sure that that tempo is embedded in the file. So we come over here. All right, so to do that, what we could do is go into your pool window. So we can go to your media menu to pool window, or just hit Control or Command plus the letter P. And we could see that we want our tempo here to be the original tempo. So in your case, Dallas, it'll be, I think it's 110 beats per minute. So we have to kind of know what the origin tempo is. So in this case, it's 88 beats a minute. And now we want to put it into musical mode. And now when I change the tempo, so let's say I go from 88 to 80 beats a minute, it will now automatically just kind of slow down to play the new tempo. So make sure that when you do this, that you go into the pool window. Make sure that you have the tempo set to 110 beats per minute and that it's in musical mode. And then it should automatically follow. So if I put a Groove Agent track with this, so let's say I want to just add like a percussion agent. So now this will automatically play back at like 88 beats a minute. Or whatever tempo. So if I change my tempo here from 80 to 106 to 96, now Groove Agent or virtual instruments or tempos synced will automatically just follow directly along. So make sure that probably the step that's missing is when you select it, going into your pool window, make sure that the origin tempo is correct, and then you could just set it for musical mode directly there. So give that a try and let me know how it works out for you, Dallas. All right, so we see Val just says someone on Reddit today asked, is there an ADSR in this sampler track? So yeah, I think we covered that last time, but we'll show you where it's at. So let's come over here to our sampler track. So all you had to do is go into the amplifier section, and then you could click on the mod here. And so now we can see, now if I wanted to adjust the attack, and if I wanted a longer release, now I released a key. And if I wanted to put another point in here, so on my attack I want to do. And we could also just come over here and have different envelope. So if I wanted to come here, let's say, okay, let's just kind of grab this envelope here. So now I could do. So you do have full kind of ADSR support. So just kind of click in the amplifier tab here, and then you could just come over here and you could do this same type of functionality for filters as well. So if you want to come over here and do envelopes for your filters or for pitch control, you could just come right over here and do all that. So you can let them know on Reddit just to click on the little mod icon to the right of the amplifier section. Thanks for asking a question. All right. Okay, Ivan Jokner says hi from Ukraine here. Thanks for joining us from Ukraine. It says, when I got a MIDI event, I shorten it and do MIDI bounce to new event. Some extra notes are still visible in the MIDI editor. Why does bounce not removing the notes? Okay, so let's say if we come here. Okay, so let's say I have, let's say these notes here. All right, so we listen to this and all right, so let's say we have these short notes kind of at the end here. All right, so if I come over here, it could depend on how you change the length of the MIDI event. Because if we want to come over here, if we just kind of resize the MIDI event, then those notes are still there within the part, but they're kind of almost orphaned in a sense. So let's see if we come here and we bounce the MIDI. Let me just see if it's under functions. Is it in there? Is it in? So it could be, you know, depending on that, but let me see if I copy this part over here. And now if we have multiple events selected, so let's say if we bounce MIDI now, you may see that some of those events are still included. Now there is a preference. So let's say if I come and let's say if I split, like let's say in the middle of this note here, you know, what we could, and then I delete, those events will be permanently gone. And there's also, and if you're in the middle of a note, like I split right in the middle of a note. So let's say if I come here, so we see this kind of long note here, and I'm going to intentionally split here. So if we go to the preferences or settings, depending on your OS, and we go to editing MIDI, there's a split MIDI events. If that's checked, when I cut and erase, this note will be cut off and will shorten the note. But without that preference checked, that note will still extend outward. So now when we play this, let's say I erase this event and we listen to this MIDI part here. It will still continue to sound because that event is still there without that. So, you know, with this particular preference checked, when we choose to split MIDI events, and now I come over and we cut in the middle of the event, that will split the note, and then we could erase it and you don't have any orphaned notes. So it could depend on how the actual cut or truncation of the event occurred. So okay. Balsa asks, on a tempo track, is there any keyboard shortcut in combination with the mouse move to switch between step and ramp, drawing tempo articulate automation? All right, so let's come over here. Let's just open up our tempo track, and if you're not familiar with it, so if a lot of people miss this where like, okay, I just want to do like an accelerando, I want it to speed up or slow down from this point, and you know, or I want to immediately go to a different tempo value, that there's kind of step. So now if we kind of draw in, it'll immediately change to that value, or there's ramp. So ramp will allow us to kind of interpolate between the two different tempos. So let's see if there's a key command for this. Yeah, it doesn't look like there's a keyboard shortcut for that. Yeah, I will pass that on. That would be handy to have, just a keyboard shortcut for that. I don't think it's possible to do in the project logical editor, but see, it'd probably be under the track operation. Yeah, so I don't think that there's a way of doing it in the project logical editor, but I'll pass that along to the team. So this Ninja Scare asks, are we going to be able to sample in the drum track, and can we add a note repeat for future updates? So that's currently when we do kind of sampling in, it's kind of limited to, we could do it in the full version of Groove Agent, not the Groove Agent SE. But you could do, the drum machine itself doesn't necessarily have the note repeat functionality, but you could easily kind of program it. But I guess let's go ahead and take a look. I think we could, you could program like a delay on each note if you wanted to. But so let's come over here. Let's make a quick drum track. All right, so currently there isn't a way. If we had, just to show you how it would work, so if you have the full version of Groove Agent, a lot of people don't know this, is that we could set up kind of like a side chain source. So we could say, okay, I want to actually record in, we're going to enable a side chain, let's say from the drum machine, for instance, in this case. So, and now when we come over here, let's say we go to our drum track, we can now just sample directly right into the pad, but it's currently not in the drum machine, but you can drag and drop samples in. As far as like note repeat, if you come over here, we could just say, okay, let's just add a delay. So if we wanted to just take our snare here, so we say, okay, let's just turn on, our delay. So when we come to, let's say, the instrument sound, we could do stuff like that. So, and if we wanted to edit the delay, so we could say, okay, instead of it being like a ping pong delay, we could just say, okay, I just want to do, so you could just choose what delay that you want to do. If we are inside of the, let's say we go to the editor here, we can just very easily, so say, so if we wanted to just come over here, you could just say, okay, I want to go to my repeats, and at this point you could just choose kind of like, you could choose kind of like your repeats that you kind of just do directly right there on the drum machine. So, the full version of Groove Agent also has kind of, when we go to like the performance tab, that you could have kind of note repeats right in. But we'll see some people will use also like a MIDI echo, the MIDI echo plugin as well. So if you wanted to utilize that, but currently the functionality is in the full Groove Agent. If we see it come down to the drum machine, I'll pass along the user request for that. All right. All right, so we see Soren says, thanks for the info on the drum machine outputs. It was something new there for me, so that's great. Always wonderful to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. All right, Ball says, thanks, Greg, for the prepare archive tip. This is super useful. It'd be cool if future update to have that automatically done or met with pop-up to ask us if we want to copy the file too. It's kind of like sometimes if you do that, then like if the file's automatically migrated over, some people don't want like large samples to be duplicated, and they don't want the sample position being affected from other projects. So sometimes there's other programs where people move the sample and you got to open up a project that's looking for that particular sample in a specific location. Then it can't find the sample because the sample is moved. So I think it's a pretty, once you know what to do, that, this is for all of your samples, for the drum machine, for the sampler track, they could all be archived at once, just once you know the prepare archive functionality. So I think it's a good balance, I think once you know the trick, it's literally one mouse click to get everything going. All right, Michael Teams wants everyone to smash the like button, and if you don't, he will hold off on his virtual ice cream distribution. All right, Soren asks, says, Greg, when I'm creating a song, I might create the verse C, A minor, F, G, followed by C, C, G, a bar each, but then I realize I need a bar in between chords between the verse and chorus, like 4 chords in a bar. I have the tools that help me, Scalar 3, but does Chord Track cater to that really with the look of the previous and next chord? All right, so let's go take a look, see if we could create this. All right. Okay, so I might create a verse C, A minor, F, G, followed by A minor, C, C, G, a bar each. Okay, so let me just create these chords here. All right, so say C, A minor, all right, F, G, okay. Okay, but then I realize I need a bar of in-between chords between the verse and chorus. Continue, okay. All right, so let's say A minor, is C, C, G. Okay, so we have our chord progression here as outlined. All right. So, but then I realize I need a bar of in-between chords between the verse and chorus, like 4 chords in a bar. I have tools. All right. So if we need to come over here, so let's say if we need like a transition where it's going to be on every single beat, if that's the question, let me just come here. So let's say, okay, I want to do, let's say G, to A minor, and we'll say B diminished. We'll make it really want to resolve. All right. So now if we wanted to, so I'm not sure if the question is more for if we could put the chords on the bars, or if we want to come here, let's say if we copy these and if we want to put them in between. So let's say we want to now push those chords here. So let's see if we just switch our grid to, so let's say if I want to put it in between the chords, I will select, let's say, the range. Let's see if I could just do, and now if we do this just on the chord track, and like if we wanted all those chords to now be kind of pushed over, I think if we come here and we just go to range and we say insert silence, that now we can move those over and paste those chords in. So let me know if you want, if the question was more like how to put it on. And here I just switched my grid mode here to beat as opposed to bar. But I think if, let's see, if I come over here, I have bar, but depending on the zoom factor. So if you can't put it in at a resolution higher than a bar, just change the grid, the snap grid here to beat, and then you could put it on each of the beats. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Soren. All right. All right, we have a question from Metin. Hi, is there a tempo detection method that gives you a single fixed BPM estimate for an audio track? I'm not looking for a detailed tempo map, just a quick way to get the one consistent tempo value. All right, so if we were just kind of coming over here, if you want just like a quick barometer, what you could do is, let's try just, if I come over here, let's go to the definition. So let's say if I just want to come over here and I select like 4 beats and we go to, let's say if we're in our sample editor here. So I think if we go to our musical mode, so if I just wanted to come over here and say, okay, this is 4 beats, we could actually just say, okay, this is 1 bar, and this will automatically, I'll take a random section here. just to show this. All right, and let me just quickly do like a bounce selection on this event. All right, so we have a completely separate audio file here. So you could just say, okay, this is, 4 beats of that song. So let's say, okay, like from here to here, that it represents 4 beats. We could come over here and say, okay, this is 1 bar, and that will show you what the tempo is directly there. So as we adjust the number of bars or the number of beats, we can say this is 1 bar and 2 beats. It will automatically calculate the tempo there. There's also the tap tempo functionality. So if we just kind of go to, let's say we're playing our song here. So if I just click on tap, so what we could do is, like, while it's playing, just click here with the mouse. And now that could automatically insert that particular tempo. So we could just say, okay, we want to insert the tempo to selection start at the, at the beginning of the song. So this way we could just automatically set the project tempo. So as we're playing along, just click here with the mouse. And then you could say set project tempo, and that will automatically be set to the project tempo. But if the tempo is fluctuating, it will, probably not be as accurate if you want to do tempo detection. And if the tempo is fluctuating, you could just take the existing track and have it play back at one single tempo. But if we take, like if you had something that was varying in tempo, I'll just open up a quick file that's gonna, like a live band that's varying. Okay, so I'll just kind of cut this intro out here. All right, so our tempo isn't matching this, but if we do just a quick tempo detection of it, so we'll come here to tempo track. So when we look at this, we can see roughly we're going between like 134 and 142. So I could just now say, okay, have this play back at 138, which is kind of like a medium. Try 138 instead. And you could kind of visualize and see kind of what the median tempo is of the track. So, once you do a tempo detection, just kind of look at So if you're just kind of watching the tempo here fluctuate from 130 to 140, you can now just turn this off and just kind of just come up with an estimate like 136. So that way you can get kind of a rough estimate. So there are a couple different methods of doing that. So let me know if that makes sense. But don't be afraid of having a accurate tempo map, because if you're aligning to other elements, then it could be a lot easier to make those elements fit. All right. All right, Michael Teams is granted uno momento 1 gallon of amaretto chocolate ice cream. All right. All right, so Michael Teams says they have new ice cream flavor from the little creamery in Texas, 1 gallon of Mexican hot chocolate ice cream for my family and myself. I'm sure my son will probably eat all of it. All right, wonderful to see Tim Weinheimer checking in from Mission Viejo, California. All right, Balsa asks, next question, is there an option in the left inspector tab of a VST instrument to turn on its multiple outputs instead of studio VST instruments and or VSTi in the right zone? Okay, so let's come over here. Let's add, let's say, Groove Agent, which has multiple outputs. Sorry, you may hear my son running above me here. All right, so now when we want to go over here to our outputs, I think if we go to our routing, that we can just come over here. So right now I see the Groove Agent. We go to the mix console, we see R1, and I'll just load up a quick kit here so everything is going out of this one stereo output. All right. So if I'm here and we see, okay, this is going out to the outputs here. If we want to activate, I could just come from the routing tab, and now as we activate, we could activate our outputs directly here. So we could do that from the inspector, and we're not limited to just doing it in the instrument rack. So again, just go, you'll see kind of the VST instrument output routing here. So this is kind of added in 13 to kind of make it a little more accessible. So now if we go to the mixer and we route internally on the mixer here, so let's say all my snares are now going to output 2. So we will just come over here, and now we hit our snare, and the snare is going to output 2, and we have the room mics that are still going to the main output there. But just select right here, and under the routing tab, you'll see kind of the MIDI output right here, the instrument, and then we could just enable all the outputs for multi-out instruments directly there from the inspector. All right, when Tim Weinheimer's received 1 gallon of Rocky Road ice cream from Michael Teams. Jazz Dude's gotten a 1 gallon of chocolate strawberry ice cream. Sounds like a good combination. Okay, sorry, my chat field just jumped. All right, you see from Balsa, it says on a tempo track, it could be simple and cool just to have a shift plus click and drag to control click and drag to be step versus ramp and drawing automation. So let me see if there's anything like that currently. Let me just check, make sure I'm not missing something if there's a modifier key. So I guess I don't need to add a tempo track if we have it here. All right, let me activate. All right, so now we're in ramp mode. Yeah, it doesn't look like there's a modifier key, but I will pass that along. It's a great suggestion. All right, so we see Brian Sawyer is on the road to Yuma, and he's going to be stopping by with Michael Teams for dinner and hanging out. It's great that people have become such wonderful friends in the Club Cubase community here, meeting in person and visiting each other who didn't know each other otherwise. All right, wonderful to see Brad Melismon from Saskatoon. Thanks for joining us and being a part of the community today. All right, so we see Jazz Dude just says Val asked, can we set on a macro knob modulators to control multiple parameters on VST3 effects on different tracks? I somehow can't seem to get a macro on any other track, only one track at a time only. So currently the modulators are going to be only accessible for a single particular track. So it's not going to do multiple parameters on different tracks. So there could be a lot of consequences with that. I can see like where you'd want to do it occasionally, but it could be a lot of adverse consequences with that. But currently the design is it's going to be limited to one particular track. And realize that this is kind of the first iteration of the modulators as well, so it's pretty startling in its depth already, but it is intended to work on a single track basis. All right, we see Jazz Dude just mentioning that the YouTube chat seems to be choking in some questions today, so if you want to add them into the Cubase Nation Discord, Jazz Dude will paste them in. So thank you for doing that, Jazz Dude. Much appreciated. All right. Wonderful to see Gareth on. He was mentioning there's some freaky purple kings in the chat. So I guess if you get to be like the first, second, or third person to join the live stream, you get a crown. And Gareth is speculating it's an Illuminati invasion. All right. Dallas LaRue just mentions he sees where a so-called band on Spotify had over 1 million followers and they finally admitted that everything was AI generated. That is scary. Maybe it's scary. I don't know if it's scary that the band was good or that people just seem to appreciate an AI group. So, but I'm sure that every song that's on a streaming service is being fed into an AI algorithm so that they don't have to pay artists that, 1/100,000th of a penny per play, because that's what's costing them. All right, so we see from Drums Clark, just says use secondary dominant chords to expand the tonic area of the progressions. E major 7th to A minor to D major 7th to G7 to C. So I'm not sure if you want me to do that or if you're just commenting on the previous chord progression. So if you let me know, Drums Clark, I'd be happy to show you how to do that. We see Jazz Dude says he's never used Spotify. I haven't really done any Spotify either. I still like buying CDs and owning music when I can. All right, see Rick France checking in from Pacific Northwest, says he's reporting late and he hates to miss a minute. So we're just glad that you made it on. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we see from Mark Lawson, says, hey guys, I made it. Hope I didn't miss anything on VST Live Pro 2. If you have your license now, yeah, so let's go ahead and take a quick look at VST Live. I did sort out my license. Sorry about that from last time. All right, so VST Live isn't really intended to be like a DAW software for composing. It's often, it's really kind of designed for live performance. So we'll come over here so we can just see, just open up a quick project here. All right, so first thing is you can import a Cubase project into VST Live 2, and so you could take projects back and forth. So if we were just kind of doing our different areas, so if we were kind of look at the project, so we could have kind of the hierarchy. So we could have projects, and we could think of a project as kind of being a number of sets. We have set lists. So set list could be individual songs. So a set list could be, these 10 songs in this particular order. And again, so a song is contained in a set list. A set list is a collection of songs. Now, when we have songs, we also have parts. Now, parts can be verse, chorus, intro. So if we wanted to come over here and add a part, we can say, okay, this is the intro, this is a chorus, this is a verse. And when we come over, we could also come over and have layers. So when we have a layer, we could say that this layer is now going to be these particular VST instruments. So we could have different inputs, outputs. We could set different split zones at this velocity, play, layer in this instrument. So these will be all of so when we come over here, we can say, okay, when we go to the chorus, we use this instrument. In the interlude, we use this. In the final chorus, it's going to be this instrument. So we get to have different instruments loaded up for MIDI performance for different parts of the songs. Now, we could have stacks, and stacks are going to be basically like a real-time audio input. So if we wanted to have a microphone that's being processed through effects, or a guitar that's being processed through a guitar amp simulator, and it's changing different areas. Now these can all go into tracks. So we could have backing tracks, and we'll notice it's going to have a very familiar kind of Cubase vibe here. So if we wanted to, it's not going to be a total in-depth editor like when we double click. So we'll have some basic editing compared to Cubase, but now we could just come over here and switch between our different parts of our song. So again, we'll see these as parts. We could have multiple songs that are loaded up. And when we do switch between parts, it's also set up so that if you have a keyboard and you're holding a chord and you switch to a different part, it doesn't automatically cut off the chord that's being held kind of in transition. So that will automatically continue to play as you switch to different parts. Now, once we have different parts, and we could have backing tracks here, or, so we could have backing tracks. We have, again, our different instruments that we are playing, or audio that's playing live in addition to the backing track. If we want to come over here, we could choose to have, the video track. So you could have up to 6 video tracks going on. There's also lyric tracks. So if you're playing everything, you could just come over here. In the distance, faintest sight of light. So this way you could see. So you could have the lyrics automatically in part of the song so that as it plays, you could just see the lyrics while you're on stage, or send that to like a teleprompter to a different screen. If you want to give this to your musicians and they all have iPads, which seems like so many musicians do nowadays, you could also just come over here and see the chord progression. So this way, as they do it, they have kind of their own chord chart.
Just keep dreaming as the tide carries you far away.
So the musicians can have the lyrics, they could have the chord charts that are kind of spit out to their phone or directly to their iPad. We could also get into, okay, I want to control DMX lighting. I want to see my time display. I want to see my video views and what monitor it's being fed out of. So you could treat it for kind of like doing a simple one-man band type of thing, where I'm going to play these instruments, and I want the drums to change, and I want to be able to navigate quickly to different parts of the project or the song. And then I want to be able to change my set list freely and easily. I want all the changes to work. So again, you wouldn't necessarily write a song in Cubase, but when you're doing kind of a typical concert production with backing tracks like background vocals, like I've done a couple gigs, with my friend from college, and and he's had, and it's like a really huge production for him because he has like one system for a teleprompter, one system for backing tracks, one system to record. You could also record the show directly into VST Live. He has another thing for chord progressions, so he has like 4 or 5 different computers for all of his backing tracks, where everything in that scenario could be done entirely in VST Live. So again, it's not intended for super detailed editing. You could do your projects, you can record, you can do sequencing directly inside of VST Live. Most people for a complex project will just simply import their Cubase project and then set it up so that, they could have the exact parts and then have the lyrics, the chord progressions automatically shown to them, so that you could just have like an intelligent live production software. And whether you're doing like a full concert with 6 different video screens and you're controlling the lighting, all those aspects you can now do entirely in VST Live. So let me know if that makes sense for you, Mark. All right, let's go back to our live questions. See, Gareth's composition of silence was even better than John Cage. I think his was a little long, so. Okay, so we see clarification from Soren. It says, Greg, it's like a situation where I want to change the key between verse and chorus, and I want a bar of transition between the keys, and I need help of what works for that transition chord track. Continue the chord track. So the chord track it's not necessarily going to come up with, when we have the chord track here. Let me just add it. Thanks for the clarification, Soren. All right, so let's. All right, so say we want to modulate between 2 different keys. All right, we just. All right, so let's just set this up quickly. Oh, sorry. All right, so let's say we have this as our progression. And all right, and let's say we want to go to E. To C sharp minor. Let's say A to B7. All right, so if we were to come here, we could say, okay. And let me just come over here and okay, so let's say we have all right, so let's say we're going C major to E major. All right, so and so if we come over here, let's get to the chord assistant. So I don't think it's going to, well, we could come over here and say, okay, if we go to the chord assistant, and let's see it as list. So, we could look at it based on previous and next chord, but it's not going to kind of generate a like a modulation progression. But it could do one chord, kind of looking before and after, but it's not going to kind of automatically generate like setting up multiple chords for a modulation. All right. All right, so we see Gareth is getting the storms in Bilbao, Spain. All right, so we see wonderful to see David M back from Liverpool area after a long holiday to Denmark and Sweden. We hope you had a wonderful vacation. Look forward to hearing about it on next Zoom meetup. Okay. All right, so we have a question from Edward Satrian. Says, when I scroll forward or backward with the controller while a song is playing, the screen follows the cursor, but if I stop the song and start scrolling, the cursor moves off the screen. Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, so let's come here. So let's say if we are scrolling, okay, so it could depend on what your cursor is, what the controller is set up to do. So let's say if I'm here, if I move like my mouse scroll wheel here, whether it's stopped or playing. So, but let's see if I have. don't have like a jog wheel, but let's see if, so let's say while this is playing here, I'll just knock this down. All right, so now we're kind of off. All right, so make sure that, and it could be, there's a setting that like while you're editing. So that, all right, so this may be, so let's say if we have the follow on, that this will automatically go. So make sure that, it could be, there's a little preference in the editing here where you could say suspend auto scroll while editing, but just here, like just holding down the shift key and using my mouse scroll wheel. I don't have a controller with like a jog wheel on my desk currently, but that seems to update whether it's playing or not. But if this setting is on, so let's say if I'm here, so if I was like doing an edit, now it doesn't scroll because the suspend auto scroll while editing is turned on. So you see if you hit F there, but just using kind of the holding down shift and using the mouse scroll wheel, that seems to kind of work as expected here. But let me know what controller you're using and what function that you're triggering from the controller. Read through comments here. All right, wonderful to see Suede TV and Recording Studio join us. Thanks for being online and part of the community today from New Jersey. All right. All right, reading through comments. All right. All right, wonderful to see Razel Zamini checking in from Denmark. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see Vittorio Piazzalunga. Does anyone produce hip-hop / trap on Cubase? So yeah, lots of hip-hop people will use Cubase. All right, so you see a question from Michael Teams. What to do if your C drive is nearly full and you need to upgrade your drive? What steps do I need to take? Upgrading to 2 terabyte NVMe M2. So yeah, hopefully you're taking advantage. There's probably some good Amazon Prime Day deals. But yeah, check. Most of the time there's going to be, I know, like with, I think Samsung drives have like a little migration utility so that you could just simply, connect it and then migrate the one drive, like kind of basically clone your existing drive to the larger drive. So there's lots of utilities to do that. All right, so we see Val just says, thanks for answering, Greg. Maybe in the future, the modulator is going to be upgraded. So, yeah, I mean, just think of this as the very first iteration of it. All right, Michael Teams is letting us know that Gareth is famous. All right, Mark Lawson is just wondering if anyone has Waves Audio, Andrew Shep's Omni Channel 2 plugin. Okay, reading through comments. Sorry. Okay, Balsa asks, hey Greg, in project window, new range tool options, I have to include or cut the part of the event that is sticking out of a range selection. Do we have that option in the MIDI editor for notes too? Okay. Okay, so see, hey Greg, in project window, new range tool options have to include or include part of the event that is sticking out of the range selection. Do we have that in the MIDI editor for notes too? All right, so let's take a quick look. All right, so all right, let me just see if I could remember what the range tool options were. So say if I'm here, just take my snap off. And I don't think that they're under the range, but you see we could cut head and cut tail. Let me see if these were under. Maybe it was under select. Okay, so we can say. So we see I think it's these for the audio segments. But let's see, range to next event. So like those functions work there. So again, if we get to select, we could say, range to previous event. So we could, do that. But let's say if we have our range tool here, right? And then we go to the select and we'll say enlarge range to next event. And that could be just the end of that MIDI note. So if we do this one more time, we'll see that will encompass the next MIDI note. So it looks like those will kind of function. So let me know if that's kind of what you're looking to do, Balsa. All right, looks like Val's going to Bilbao, Spain. He's going to see the Guggenheim and a wine tasting. All right, well, it's so wonderful to see Pablo Vasquez from Galicia, España. So we have the whole hot mess group on. Glad you can make it, Pablo. All right, so we see Mark Lawson says, amazing, thanks, Greg, I'm buying it. So yeah. Crazy Pablo has another gig today. All right. All right, so we see Fly V just says, I have a bunch of unmapped CC buttons. Can I change all the numbers to regulate like CC 1, 2, 3? So let me know like what controller it is. So generally most MIDI controllers, you know, if you have a knob that's transmitting on a particular, if you have it a knob that's transmitting a particular MIDI continuous controller message, most MIDI controllers will allow you to take that MIDI controller message and assign a different MIDI controller message. Some may be fixed. If it is a fixed value, so let's say, and it's really like, the better place to do that control is on a controller level. If the controller is fixed and you can't adjust which MIDI CC is being transmitted, if we come over to, we can adjust some by going into the input transformer. And if we come over here to track, and then we open the panel, we could do stuff like, okay, when I have, I want to take my CC1, like my modulation wheel here, and I want to turn that into MIDI CC11. So I want to take MIDI continuous controller 1 and transform it to MIDI continuous controller 11. So I'll go ahead and open up the MIDI inserts. Let's go to like the MIDI monitor. All right, so when I move controller 1, we can see that. So what I want to do is let's make an input transformer preset. So we say we want to transform my MIDI CC1. So we're going to take this type is equal to a controller. And we can say that controller value. So I think if we come here to subtype, we're going to say we're going to take MIDI CC1. And what we want to do to that is we're going to take, let's see, we're going to take the subtype and we're going to add 10. So we go from MIDI continuous controller So if I did this right, we go from MIDI continuous controller 1 coming in to controller 11 from the same knob. So you could set up 4 different controllers here on the input transformer if you can't get the exact mapping. So with this turned off, it's MIDI CC1. Now that I take my MIDI continuous controller and modulation is CC1, I want to go to CC11. 1 plus 10 equals 11. Then we could see now we're doing MIDI continuous controller 11. I turn it off, MIDI continuous controller 1, turn it on, MIDI continuous controller 1. So you could, if your controller is limited and doesn't allow you to adjust, you can do some software input transforming and then have that automatically transform to the correct MIDI CC that you want or need. All right. All right, so we have from Blue Snake says, hi Greg, Windows 11, Cubase 14 Pro. I installed Halion Sonic 7 collection. When I open an instrument track, it's Halion Sonic SE and tells me no valid license detected. Connect e-licenser, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Okay, so it could be, so it says you installed the Halion Sonic 7 collection. And then there's Halion Sonic SE. Halion Sonic SE was kind of the previous generation. So it could be that you just need to come over and go to your Steinberg download assistant. and the Halion Sonic SE was out and utilized and required the E-licenser. Now, it could be that that was working for you, but make sure that when you come over here, so say we go to Cubase Pro 14, you will see that you're going to have the Halion Sonic instrument. So, in the latest version of that is 7.1.4. So make sure that so the Halion Sonic 7 collection is just the sound set, kind of the presets and kind of the sounds, and they play back through Halion Sonic 7 and not through Halion Sonic SE. So Halion Sonic SE was kind of the previous generation, and that was like 4 years ago or so. But just make sure that you have Halion Sonic 7.14, and that will be licensed under your Cubase license. So if that's installed, that will run your Cubase license, and then all the Halion Sonic 7 sounds will play back using the Halion Sonic. But make sure that you have this installed, and then if you do that, then I think you'll be all set. Okay. Yeah, we see Rick from Bratman Studio just mentioning about how New Mexico also got hit hard with floods, so it's kind of sad to see a house going down a river. All right. Wonderful to see Anthony Clark on. Thanks for joining us today. All right. Alfred G. Pogo just asked, how do you normalize for audio export? So I think Nuendo has a special function, especially for like post, that I don't think is in Cubase, but we'll show you just a trick away. So let's say we go to our export audio mix down. All right. So we have different options here. Now, if we go to Nuendo will have a slightly different function. Let me just see if it still has it. Okay, so if we come over here, let's get to our export audio mix down. All right, and so here we could normalize to integrated loudness to like very specific levels for broadcast. So that's a Nuendo specific aspect. If we were doing this inside of Cubase, so we could do this after the fact, but that is kind of a Nuendo specific feature, because often post-production will be very tight on different controls. But if we had exported something, and let's say this is and we look at the audio file, if we just come over here to your audio and go to processes, we could choose normalize here, and as soon as we get normalize, we could normalize at specific dB values or at specific integrated loudness settings as well. So you would have to kind of do it after the fact inside of Cubase, but Nuendo, you could export your file directly to, various broadcast standard loudness without concern. In Cubase, you just have to do it afterwards. And again, that would be an audio to processes to normalize. And you would have the option to do it in dB or loudness units. All right, so we see Bratman Studios as he's number 16 on the top fans board. Wow, someday he'll be up there with Jazz Dude. All right. All right, we're glad to hear that Michael Teams is safe from the flooding. It's good to know. I figured it was a little bit a ways from you. All right, you see Raw Justice Hip Hop says that he produces all he does is produce hip hop in Cubase. All right, it's wonderful to see Contemplate Music has made it to his second live club Cubase. Glad you made it. All right, so we see from Balsa, just as a question in the chord pad player mode sections, can we have more than 4 yellow notes for controlling chords to have more than 4 notes in their voicings? All right, so let's take a look. Just revert this quickly. Trying to figure out where this effect is coming from. All right. All right. All right, so let's say we have a chord with, so we'll come over here. So we'll have our roads. Let's get to the chord pads. All right, so let's create a chord. Let's say a C. 7th, 9th chord. Okay. So now we'll come over to our section chords here. Let me turn this on. All right, let me just try a new project real quick here. Sorry. Okay, so now all right, so say G7 flat 9. right, so say if we all right, so let me just see if we go to like our setup here. Let's get to the player remote and let's see if we could. All right, so when we get to sections here, so we can see C3, D3, E3, F3. If we come over here, we could add, looks like, if we just say, okay, let's make it G3. So that should give us 5 notes within the chord. So now that we come over here and I play this chord, so now we can see that that is expanded. So come here, you'll see almost like the little MIDI icon in the right-hand corner. And then go to the player remote control. And then for the sections, and it looks like you could have subsections as well. So let's see what happens if we come here to do A3. Yeah, so if you needed to do 10 voices for a chord to play that, it looks like you could have all those voices just kind of triggered right there from the player remote control. So once you're in the chord pads, come here to the settings, click on the player remote control, then you can have sections and subsections to expand beyond 4. Okay. All right, you see Tim K giving kudos to Jazz Dude's moderation. All right, you see Gerald Ely just saying he likes his spam with eggs. Thanks for joining us, Gerald, from Martinez, California. Hope you're well. So Contemplate Music says, Greg, did you or your team thought about consolidating all your answers into one massive and comprehensive tutorial for Cubase, Wavelab, or any other ARA integrated software? That would be a gem. So, I have probably 700, 800 tutorials. By the time you actually create everything in one massive thing, then the developers at Steinberg, how dare they come up with 300 new features for every new version, it seems like. So it's hard to kind of keep going, and we could always use kind of the built-in, utilizing the Cubase index to kind of find what you want. Sometimes, if you're to think of like a tour of Cubase, that could be 40 hours to get through features. So, and if you don't do scoring, do you want to sit through the scoring? Or if you're a classical composer, do you want to sit through hip-hop production techniques? So I think, this format's kind of interesting that, people can learn from other people's questions and, and we, go through and painstakingly kind of detail all the different questions so that people can search pretty easily. And, always special thanks to Jan for the Cubase index. So if you're looking for a particular function, you could search the Cubase index and find it pretty easily, and also find stuff within the, Cubase Nation Discord. So, see Michael Teams giving kudos to Jazz Dude that he's the Yoda of moderators. All right. All right, so we have Brian Sawyers in Van, Texas, on his way to see Michael Teams and get some real ice cream. So sounds good. Hope you guys have a wonderful visit. Tim K says ice cream only works with root beer, not real beer, but chocolate works with both. Chemistry is fun. We hope that your drive is going well with your wife, Brian. All right, Antoine Van Kampen. Hi, Greg. Question. I have a snare recording. Is there a way to replace the snare hits with my own samples without using Groove Agent? Yeah, certainly. So let's come over here. So let's say we have this project here. We want to replace our snares. So I'm just going to, let's say I have a sampler track. So let me just come over, drop a snare sample in. So let's say, okay. All right, so I want this snare sample. Okay, so what I want to do now is, so we have our sampler track. All right. I'm going to come over here. Let's say, okay, we'll listen to our drums. And let's say where our snare is going to come in here. All right, so what I want to do is just come over here. We'll double click. We want to go to our hit points. And we're going to edit the hit points. We're going to find kind of the rhythmically significant points, not the tracks that are bleeding through. And now you'll see this little create tab. I'm going to select the sampler track where we are. So again, we will come over here and I'm going to say, let's create MIDI notes. I want to put it to, I think E1 is our root note. We want to retain the dynamics and we wanted to put it on the selected track, which is our sampler track. So now when we play, so now if I want to mute the snares, now it's just playing the sampler track. So our snares are muted and then we could blend the two together. So you don't have to use Groove Agent. You could output it to anything that will kind of play back a sample. Groove Agent's great for that. Sampler track is also great. We could do it into the drum machine. So anything that could kind of trigger off a sample. But again, just come over to your snare track, double click. You want to go to the hit point editor, edit the hit points. You may have to kind of tweak like we don't want like toms or hi-hats that are bleeding through, especially in a live drum recording, and come over here and adjust the intensity just a little bit, and that will kind of fine. And on the create tab, just create MIDI notes, assign it to the MIDI note. I had that track selected. We can make a new track, assign it to anything. We could retain the dynamics, and then you've done replacement directly on with your own samples without using Groove Agent. So let me know if that works for you, Antoine. All right, Uno Memento says, by clicking the like button, you support the mental health work of Cubase users. It's also just a good karma thing to do. All right. All right. See from Blue Snake says, great, thanks, Greg. So you're welcome. All right, Kenneth Day asks, proper way to hook up MIDI Roland 300 NX with UR44. Let me just look what a Roland 300 NX is. Sorry, let me just look it up on my monitoring computer. Okay, so I see an RD 300NX, which looks like kind of the stage piano. All right. So if that has USB, you could connect it via USB without without. So if you're looking to use the N300X or the Roland 300NX, let me just check again if that's still okay. So if it's looks like the stage piano, let me know if I'm mistaken. So if it has a USB out, you could connect the USB directly to the computer and then still play back all of your instruments. It'll show up as a MIDI input. So if we come over here to like a track that accepts MIDI, we can choose to just have, when we go to our routing, here we could say, okay, I want, like here's my panorama controller. So if it's USB, we could connect it there. If there's no USB on it, you could take the 5-pin MIDI cable and connect that into the MIDI input of your UR44C, and then you would connect it directly there. So you could get MIDI in and out that way, either USB or connect the MIDI cable out to the UR44. If you want to incorporate the sounds, like, most stage pianos, people like the piano and organ and Rhodes and strings patches. And if you want to incorporate those particular sounds and have those go through your VST plugins, you could connect that as, if you go to your audio connections, we could configure it as an external effect. So let's say you have, depending on your UR44, you have 2 line level inputs in the back. So we could come over here, we'll not add an external effect, we'll choose an external instrument rather. And then you can say, okay, this is my 300NX or NX300. And we'll see the return bus here, and what you do is connect it into the inputs. We're going to take the audio outputs from the keyboard, connect it to 2 of the line level inputs. So if you have a UR44C, you probably have 4 mic pre's and 2 line level inputs connected to the 2 line level inputs on the back. Tell it to go right here. And then when you go to add an instrument, we can say, okay, let's add an instrument track. We could say at this point, we want this to go to your external, and then you just would select your external instrument there. And then the MIDI would go into Cubase via the USB or the MIDI out, and then the audio is coming back into Cubase, and then you should be all set. For people that have large MIDI rigs, they'll often have a mixer and combine the output of their Cubase in the mixer with all their different instruments as well. So let me know if that makes sense for you, Kenneth. All right, we have, I guess, Woo Productions checking in from Belgium. Thanks for joining us today. All right, Contemplate Music says, don't want to occupy too much of your precious time, Greg, but are Nuendo and Cubase projects cross-compatible? Can Cubase projects... Excuse me. Let me... I'm just going to clear my throat. Hang on. All right, sorry about that. Just had to get a little glass of water. All right, so yeah, so Cubase projects and Nuendo projects are cross-compatible. So you could easily open up Nuendo projects in Cubase and Cubase projects in Nuendo, no problem. All right, David M. says, Greg, is it possible to audition sounds in Halion before loading them? Okay, so let's go ahead and go to Halion here. All right, so say I just want to come over here to Etude. All right, so I'm going to just kind of double click here and then if I, all right, so all right, so let's say if I'm here in, let's just go to the media bay. So just real quick, we'll jump home. So let's go to our VST instruments. So if you want to audition before opening, we will come over and let's say under sampler, go to Halion. So we could now just come right over here. And it may take a second for it to. And if we want to just come over here, so we'll say, so we could just say, okay. So now as soon as we come over here, so if we were to go to a different instrument and say, okay, I just want to come over here to FM, I could just click right here. And say, oh, that's the sound, double click, that will load the instrument for us. And now we could just come right over here, and now that particular sound is loaded. So you could just do it from the right zone media bay. Just kind of, if you go home, just go to your VST instruments, select your instrument, choose kind of your different presets here, and so when you could audition from your MIDI keyboard or directly from different keys right there. So, and you could have a little recorder if you wanted to. All right, wonderful to see Jesse Carmichael on, be our celebrity attendee today. And I just was reading Graham Nash's book, and I saw him mention you, Jesse. So it was nice to see you mentioned and your connection with him. So, all right, and his question is, in and out of New York City today, but we checking on a stream. Wondered if you could dig into some comping workflow for multi-tracks like a drum kit, including crossfades and track versions. All right. All right, so let's say we'll just set up like 6 tracks just for demonstration purposes here. All right, so All right, so I want to put, let's say I have multiple takes here. So I'm going to put these into a folder. All right, and so I want to do just record here. So we'll say this is going to be take 1, and we're going to do different takes. All right, let's do take 2. Take 3, then we just, let me just, all right, let's go to take 4. All right, so now we have different drum takes, and we want to do kind of comping on these drum takes. Okay, so what I always do, and for this to kind of get like the best results, is we want to come over here and let's open the lanes. If you don't see the lane types, we can just simply come right over here and we can go to the track control settings and make sure your lane display type, if you don't see it, that's going to be indivisible controls, and you can just right click on and just to access your track control settings. So I want to take all these tracks here, and we could put group editing on, and I'm going to just expose the lanes for all these different ones here. Okay, so now we have, so I think, and it seems it's kind of annoying, but it could be where you need to have like the different ones open. Now that we have all of the lanes open and they're in a folder, we could just grab our comp tool and just simply come right over here and comp between the multiple takes and say, okay, like this take better. We notice that when we select, that now they're all going to be selected simultaneously, and we could just come over here and now one of the things that you could do to, if you are, worried about like the different crossfades is on each track, you could come over and activate the auto fades settings. So once you turn this on, you could just say, okay, I want to do auto crossfades. And you won't see this visually, but what it will do is a very short, like 10 millisecond fade in, fade out, or crossfade between each of the different sections. So you don't see it visually, but it just happens on playback. So that's how so once you have the multi-tracks, put them into a folder, put it on group editing, open up the lanes for each one, because I think if the lanes aren't open, that those edits won't automatically carry over, but it's when so let's see if we do this. This is our comp here. Oh, looks like you may not have to have it open. Looks like it carried over. Let me just open up the lanes, but yeah, so but that's how you could do kind of like your drum comping just right along there. So give that a shot, Jesse, and hope you're well. Hope the album production is going well. Looking forward to the release. And a cool story from Graham Nash. Hope you and your family are well. All right, so we see Anthony Clark says, hi, Greg. When trying to replicate 808 glides or bending, how to make it bend slow and fast if there's notes on top of each other, how to select one note to bend in a certain speed from MIDI. All right. Okay, so let's see if we come over. Let me open up a quick project. Let me just see if it's in here. No. All right, let me just do it in the sampler track. Okay, so let's say if we want to come here. All right, so say. All right, so let's open up our sampler track here. All right. All right. So when trying to replicate 808 slides or bending it, how to make the bend slow and fast. If there's notes on top of each other, how to select one note in a bend at a certain speed from MIDI. So it could depend on your instrument. Most of the time when you're doing bends, it's actually going to be in a monophonic mode. So we'll come over here. So we'll put this in monophonic mode. So let's see if we can do it without that. So let's just do glide. So here, if I want to, all right, but I'm gonna not have it re-trigger the notes. So here, there's, if we go to legato mode, I could just, sorry, let me just knock my phone over again. All right, so we could adjust the frequency for the glide. So if we, so you could do some different stuff like that, but most of the instruments that kind of do the 808 kind of bends like that are working in monophonic mode. So let me know exactly what instrument that you're using it with, and that can make a difference, Anthony. All right. Blue Snake's question, can we change metronome accent of place, like on beat 2? Can you go over some metronome settings, etc., please? All right, so let's come over here. Let's say we have our metronome. So we'll turn this on. All right, so if we actually just go to our metronome here, and we'll see what we have, little patterns. So if we kind of extend this over to the right from our metronome, we'll see these 3 dots. We have a pattern. Now that we could also just come over here and add a signature track. And if we select, let's say our 4/4, we could see our click pattern here in the info line. So let's say I want to emphasize beat 2 instead. So now as soon as we, and if we wanted to come over and say, okay, I want to have different pitches, I could say, okay, I want different pitches on the metronome. I could say, okay, I want to start on beat 2. So, or if I only want it on the pulse of 3. So, again, I could just come over here and say, okay, let's just make it our normal click pattern. Or let's say now I want this to, say, let's do double tempo. Or let's say we're in 4/4 time, but someone is playing a pattern in 7 over 4/4. Or let's say if if you want to do like 12, so let's say okay, you're trying to get like a 12/8 pattern. So we could just kind of come directly over here and just kind of choose different, any type of metronome pattern that you want. So let's say, okay, you want to go to cut time. So let's say your conductor doesn't have to feel like they're trying to fly as a chicken. Or if you want it to be 6/8. So still, but in 4/4. So all sorts of great patterns that you could do. So you could have 4 different pitches, and very flexible with patterns. So if you, so you'll see like at the bottom here, if you want to expose those in the transport, just kind of go to the right hand side. You'll see it turned to arrows that face to the left and right. And now we could just extend those over to make it visible, or add a signature track. And then you could, so once you have a signature track, so we can say, okay, we're in 4/4. And then if you wanted to have different patterns at different parts, we can say, okay, here I want normal 4/4. Here I want to be emphasizing. So I could have a separate pattern here. So let's say I don't want 1. So we can say normal 4/4. Now no 1. And let's say I want to do, a double time starting right here. So we'll just go to the click pattern and choose double tempo. So as we look at it, so normal, this will miss beat 2. Now double time. And we can say, okay, I want this double time, and you could just double click on it, and I want to change the pitch accordingly. So now as we play, so lots of flexibility with the click track. So let me know if that makes sense for you. Audi and Lee says, hi Greg, what do you think about the Cubase Pro 14 internal plugins? Which ones are your personal favorites for audio mixdown? Would you still use lots of external plugins? I have lots of external plugins, but I tend not to use them. I think that you could definitely, like if you had to do all of your work with the built-in plugins, that you could definitely do it and come out with a great sounding product. So, you used to be many companies, I would say that their internal plugins, what's a good way to describe it? Maybe like batteries included. Like if you get a toy for Christmas, you don't get like Energizer or like a brand name battery. You just kind of get like a super generic battery. And that's how a lot of like programs that have internal plugins, I would say how they kind of work. Check out like all of, I would say there's no like real weak Steinberg plugin. So the channel EQ, Elliot Shiner, who's like probably one of the finest audio engineers in the world, this is his favorite EQ, just a built-in stock. If you had to get like really kind of surgical, you could check out the frequency EQ. So this will give you 8 bands, and you could choose. And this is also dynamic EQ. So if you have kind of resonant frequencies, you could also do mid-side or left-right independent with the EQs. A lot of the, if you're going for, so also with the EQs, if you want kind of, classic Pultec style EQs, for, dynamics, definitely check out Black Valve if you want just like kind of a great compressor. If you're doing vocal stuff, it's hard to beat the simplicity and having everything that's in the vocal chain, because you have kind of 18 different plugins included here. Probably the most comprehensive delay plugin that you could ever imagine is going to be the multi-tap delay. There's also, here you could have effects on each tap if you wanted to. If you wanted lots of creative approaches, you could get into the FX modulator. So you could pick kind of different effects and have those modulate, or if you wanted to come over here, say, okay, I want the pitch to modulate, I want to adjust panning. So all sorts of different stuff and multiple sidechain inputs. And also with delay, something, you just want like a great simple studio delay. If you want reverb, great choices, whether you want it to be, a convolution, sample-based reverb, or if you want something that just makes stuff sound beautiful, like put on an acoustic guitar and it sounds like an orchestra, used a shimmer reverb. So I think that everyone, if you spent more time with the internal plugins, like one sentiment I hear expressed is like, oh, I don't know why I bought a bunch of plugins if I have that already inside of Cubase, and like if you want to do kind of DJ and kind of different stutters, check out like the Loop Mash FX, it's just great for all those different types of things. So I think it's worth exploring the built-in plugins, and don't dismiss them because they're included. They are some of the best plugins on the market. All right. See, Tim K just says, I predict you're going to enjoy Greg's metronome breakdown. All right, sorry, my chat field jumped on me. All right, so we see Balsa just says, hey Greg, I meant edit range tool, splits, partly selected events in MIDI editor. When I range select a bar of notes and want to copy or move, it cuts the notes that are sticking out of range. All right, so let me just create that real quick. Okay. Okay, so we have some chords here. Let me just... Okay, so it says I meant edit range tool splits, partly selected events in the MIDI editor. When I range select a bar of notes and want to copy them or move, it cuts the notes that are sticking out of range. Okay, so let's say if I cut this, let's say I move it here. Okay, so it says I'm at edit range tool. All right. So edit. All right, so let me just make sure I'm looking at the same. I'm at edit range tool splits, partly selected events in the MIDI editor. When I range select, All right, so range tool splits partly selected events. Let me see. All right. All right, all right. It says MIDI getter, when I range selected bar of notes I want to copy or move, it cuts the notes that are sticking out of range. Okay, so, all right, so we do this. It's going to kind of split the notes there. But do you want to copy this particular range without splitting? Let's see if we... All right, so maybe you want to... Let's see if... Let me know if this is what you want to do. So with the range tool, if we want to copy those but leave those in place. So I just held down the Alt key, and let me see. And it may... So these will be separate events here because it's split that event. But I guess that if you come here to edit and glue, that you could glue those events together. So let me know if that's kind of what you're running into, Balsa. So if we... Says mid-air, when I select a bar of notes I want to copy or move, it cuts the notes that are sticking out of range. So I think it's going to split these particular notes here. So if I hold down the Alt key, but and not the Command or Control key, so hold down my Alt or Option key. I've done that. And now if you just kind of select that particular range and you can just go to Edit to glue, they will all be kind of one event as opposed to 3 separate events. So maybe try that. Let me know if I'm kind of barking up the right tree with that. I see Jazzy mentioning if you use a new drum machine to replace the snare, you can stack 4 different sounds, electronic, synthesized, plus samples to get the perfect sound. It's a great point. All right. Bim Bim asks, hi Greg, I usually create independent instrument tracks. I have a problem with my chip. So what's your advice on creating VSTi project for Composer, movie to save on my CPU? Thanks so much, sir. So what I would do is, unless, if you don't need to keep everything active, like if you're starting off with a particular template, let's see if I have, just open up a quick orchestral. All right, so what I would probably do if you're running out of CPU is, what a lot of composers are doing now is just coming over and right-click, select the tracks, and you could choose to disable selected tracks. And then when you go to use a track, all you have to do, and you could assign a keyboard shortcut for this, is to just enable the selected track. And that way, if they're disabled, they're not going to be utilizing CPU, audio performance and memory. So try to just come over And like as you use tracks, you can just simply enable the track and leave it disabled until you actually use it. And that could help with your audio performance. So let me know if that's helpful, if you're not doing that already. He just comments asking if I'm okay. I just coughed and just need a little glass of water. So, all right. So we have a question from FlyV on the recording section. What is the button called Asio compensation used for on the tracks? So let's see if we're in the recording. There's probably going to be the Asio latency compensation. So that could turn off. So let's say on this track, if we had an insert of like different plugins. So we could do this globally on where we call it the constrained delay compensation. So let's say we have a plugin that is, very latent, that adds latency. And sometimes, plugins need for their processing to add latency. So if I turn this on, we could basically do the Asio delay compensation to bypass latent plugins. So we could just do that on a track by track basis right there. So that can bypass plugins that are causing latency that could inhibit like recording parts due to their latency of what's in the system. All right, Amato Solo asks, is there a way to remove all plugins from a channel at the same time? So if you wanted to, let's say we had a number of inserts here. Okay, so I think if we just kind of go, like if we come here, let's see if we, if we want to hold down the command or control key and click just right here, that we could reset the channels just like that. So again, on the inserts, just come right here, command or control, and click just to the right of the inserts. So let's see if we just come over here without it being open, that we could reset the channel so that no plugins are on it. All right, so we have Pertti Komenen joining from Finland as well. I see David M says, thanks, Greg. Halion answer was useful. So that's good. All right. So it says, during the steps of creation with drums, how do you know to make sure they are in beat 4/4? So, generally when we're making drums, just jump back. All right, so a great way of doing this, is, let's say if we just start with like a one measure drum part, and I'm just going to put this, hit the letter P, and we can put this in a loop, and we'll just solo this particular. And you could also just hit Alt P. So we could say, okay, now we want to So let's say, okay, we want to come over here. So, if you're just kind of, you could see that we have one measure selected here. So, and you could just kind of visually see, so make sure that your grid is set to bars and beats. Then you could clearly see that you have, 4 beats and you're in 4/4. We have one measure event. And you could just, like when starting, if you just double click, that will create a one measure blank event. And you could just kind of work to make sure that that's aligned to the grid. So as you're playing, you could just have all sorts of, and that's how you can see the correlation between the grid. So when we look here, we can see our beats as the vertical lines, measure 1, measure 2, measure 3, measure 4, etc. So all right, so Gerald Ely says the Halion sample before loading tip is great. So thanks for, glad you found it useful. All right, so we see Michael Pierce joining from Grand Chapel Studios in England. Says, hope everyone is safe and well. Sweltering over here today and hopping in and out while we try to cool the house down. Happy Friday. Yeah, we just had our air conditioner fixed yesterday, so it's a nice, pleasant, it's very, very much better than not having air conditioning in our upstairs part of our house. All right, you see John Costigan is going out for a quick walk with his wife. Enjoy your time. All right, wonderful to see Captain Energy Music checking in from outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. All right. Okay, so we see clarification from Anthony Clark. Says, I'm using long 808 samples, playing it through MIDI, Greg. I want to glide the same sample in different speeds, but there's no way to draw the pattern in MIDI. So, I guess you could. So let's say if we want to, let's just see if I still have the project open. You might be able to kind of do it with modulators. So I'm not sure what you're playing it in, what the sample is playing it through, or what the instrument is. But if it's like a sampler track, you might be able to just, so let's say, like I want to take this particular pitch, so you might, another approach may be to, so let's say if we have, so let's say we have this sound, and let's come over to, let's say, a modulator. Let me just open up. All right, so let's get to modulators here. So let's say you wanted to rise up, and let's come over here and set the pitch. All right, let's see if we could do, just make the sampler track. All right, and let's come over here to the modulators. All right, so we have fine tune, but let's say coarse. But, let me know what instrument you're actually doing it from and if you're in monophonic mode when you're doing it. So he says you're playing the 808 samples through MIDI, but, it's probably going to be playing back through a sampler of some kind. All right, so you see Jazz Dude says and this may be in relation to favorite plugins. Jazz Dude he says a Pong game, so we'll show you that. So there's a little Easter egg inside of Cubase. So let's say you have your meters set up here. So if you kind of click on the Steinberg logo a certain number of times, and go to other, you'll then see game, and you could play Pong. So we actually kind of released this as we announced this feature on April Fool's Day. Yeah, just as a nice little, and everyone thought we were joking, but yes, you can actually play Pong inside of Cubase. All right, with the Supervision plugin. All right. Rod Justice Hip Hop says Frequency is his favorite plugin. Rod Justice Hip Hop says he just mastered his first song with Wavelab Pro. Really liked the master rig. It's all I needed. So. All right, so you can see Captain Energy Music says, Greg, great to see you. Sorry I'm late, so you don't have to worry about being late. We're just happy you're here, and thanks for being a part of our community for so long. See, Raw Justice Hip Hop says, yes, I made the mistake of not knowing my plugins in Cubase, and I spent a lot of money on plugins that do the same thing as the stock plugins. I wasted over $600 on Waves alone. All right. And Contemplate Music says if you ignore the Cubase plugin, that's a really silly choice, but if you really have to, ignore everything apart from the envelope shaper and magneto. Yes, and Quattro Fuzz is another great one I should have mentioned. Alti and Lee says, doesn't the freeze function help a lot with computer performance? So the freeze function can work a lot of times when composers are working. So if you're doing like a lot of MIDI orchestration and stuff like that, composers may have, hundreds or thousands of tracks open that are taking audio performance that aren't actually there. So for composers to work effectively, most of them have a large template with all of their available sounds active. But you could have all of your available sounds, but just have them disabled and hit one button and turn it on. so that you're, because many plugins will take a lot of audio performance without doing anything, just by simply existing and playing back, by waiting for something to happen with them. But a lot of times there's no actual content to freeze to help with the computer performance. So it could depend on different settings. All right, so we see from Bratman Studio, hey Greg, I used a Halion 7 drum set, not drum machine or groove agent, spread across the keyboard, hip-hop multi. Is there a way to set to different outputs for each drum? All right, so I think we did this before. Let me see if I can remember it. So let's get a Halion 7. All right, so it's going to be... make sure, okay, so hip-hop multi. Okay. All right, so we have all these sounds. All these sounds are going out to a stereo output. All right, so I think if we come over and let's go, let's say we need to be kind of in the right zone. All right, and let's come over, let's add a tab here. Right, maybe the program tree. Okay, so, all right, so we've added the program tree up here in the upper right-hand corner. So we'll see our different hip-hop sounds here. So let's see if we have... Some of these might be kind of like too baked in to, let's see if we come over here to, yeah, this one might be too baked in, but a lot of the kits, yeah, we can see that this is locked. Let's see if we could unlock this. Yeah, I think that our particular samples here are locked. So this might be protected. But a lot of the kits, let me just come over. And if I want to take like a different drum kit, so yeah, some of them may be kind of just locked in place. You could sample it and drop it into Groove Agent if you wanted to, but a lot of times, like if I come over here to so let's see if we get to our program tree here. Yeah, so I think some of those samples may be locked for, but a lot of times what you could do is just add a bus on some of the tracks that aren't locked, and at that point you could map it out, but some of the kits may be kind of fixed. But if we come over here and say, okay, I want to take this, we're going to put it onto F0. If you really needed to, we could just kind of draw in an F0 note. And let's say if we have Groove Agent, like if you really need it to do it. So let's just. So if you draw this note in and let's say render in place. And now I could take that particular sound and drop it right into my Groove Agent. So we could change, we could trim the start time, so we could just versus, so you could hit it with different velocities and stuff. So some of them may be kind of like just kind of baked in together where you can't necessarily split it, and I think that's one of them. Sorry about that, Rick. All right. All right, so we see from Val says, I recently had a problem again that I have my Supervision on my control room output and it always takes the click in the measurements. Do I need to put Supervision in the on the stereo out instead? Okay, so let's say if I'm here, so let's say we have this playing and I have the click track. All right, so let's say if we turn all these down here real quick. All right, so let's see if there's a way to kind of bypass the click here. So obviously if we go to the main tab here, we could just turn the click off. So while we don't hear it, it's not going to be kind of baked in. But let me just... So you could turn the click off here. But let's see if we we'll put Supervision on the main outputs, but the main outputs. So since the click is being routed through that, it looks like we're not seeing on the main output, so we get Supervision. It's not there, but since the click is going through the control room, but you could just simply turn the click off in the control room if you need to, but since it's being routed through the control room, if your Supervision is there, it will show right there. But let's see if there's maybe another approach where you can say not the stereo out, but let's say the mix down out. Let's see if we change our source. Yeah, so you need to probably put it in the control room, but I don't think there's a setting to turn that off, but I could pass it along as kind of a feature request to not process that. But let me just see if there's any. Yeah, so I think you might just have to take the click track and turn it off in the control room if you didn't want it to reflect. Sorry about that. All right, so we see Flyv just says, thanks, Greg, for all my questions for today. So you're welcome. Just so what we do, answer people's questions. So if no one has questions, then it would be a boring live stream. All right. All right, so we see Val says he actually sometimes play Pong with my clients. So, yeah. Engineers used to have like little moments of vacation time, like rewinding tape and stuff like that we don't really have as much these days for kind of killing time. Maybe rendering files is the same thing. Val says it's a funny Easter egg. All right. Gerald Ely says, I always forget how to play the Pong game, like I need another distraction. All right, so we see from Bim Bim says, thanks for replying my question. And Greg, I'll do it one more ask. When I select a track, it's zoom in and sometimes zoom out. How do I fix it? All right, so if you notice that the track height is changing as it's selected, it could be a little check mark here. Go to the edit menu, and then there's enlarge selected track. So now if I click on a particular track, that track is enlarged, or if we click on multiple tracks, they can be enlarged. But again, go to your edit menu and uncheck enlarge selected track, and then when you select a track, it won't change the vertical height. But with that enabled, we just now come over here and we change the vertical height right there. All right. All right, we see Millard Brown checking in from just outside, I think, north of Philadelphia, if I'm not mistaken. We have Tiago from Brazil, who was formerly in England for a bit, doing some studies. All right. See, Jazz Dude says he just did a workaround. He used a Halion Sonic drum set and just used 16 MIDI channels and multi-temporal with 16 drum sounds out and routed them to individual outs. That's a good approach as well. All right, so we see Raw Justice Hip Hop's going to be heading over to Virginia to go to the water park. Have a great time. If you're ever in Alexandria, let me know. Get together for a coffee or something if you want. All right, we see George from Germany just saying hi to everyone. It says, I've had many crashes, not that I felt like anything was wrong, but on startup I get the message that Cubase didn't close regularly. And if I want to send the log files to Steinberg, is there any way I could view the log files to find out what might be the problem? So you can, there is like when you get the particular file, when you get the message, it will, it will point you to an area where there is the crash dump. And then sometimes there are some utilities that can help you read the crash dump. I know that there are some on Windows that I've used. I don't know of any on Mac OS off of the top of my head, but I'm sure that there are some. But it will, I think... but it will kind of show you the location of the crash dump. All right. And I see from George says, did you get my file with the electric bass sounds out of pitch? Yeah, I did get the file, and I think I have it here. And I agree that in that file, it does sound out of pitch. But when I've used it, I haven't had any problems. I think I probably still have it. And I forgot to send this over to the team at Steinberg, but I think this was the file here. And to me, it does sound a little out of pitch in this example, but when I've used it on tracks, it doesn't sound but let me just come over here. I'll just render this. And then let's do like a very audio on it and take a look. So, I mean, I've used it plenty of times without any. All right, so let's look at this in very audio and see if it's. All right, so if we select all these, so we can see that they're not moving ever so slightly, but I will send this over to Germany. But when I've used it on particular projects, I haven't had it seem like it's out of tune. And let me just take another project here real quick. Where I have some MIDI bass. All right, so I'll just add the electric bass here. I think you just had the jazz bass sound, so let me just. Now if we compare it with the other one here. That's the original there. So let me just select all the events on that. So that's the one MIDI bass part here, and that's. And let's see with the real bass recording, which may be out of tune with the MIDI. But the two MIDIs against each other in this example, it sounds fine. But regardless, I'll pass it along to the guy who did the samples for it and see if he has any ideas. Sorry about not responding to it in previous live streams. Okay. Okay, so you see, Uno Memento says it'd be very rare for it to get 100 likes. It's the result of Greg having taught us so well that we don't need any more guidance, or is it because we're just chilling out over the summer? So, all right. All right, reading through comments. All right. All right, Best Green Jesus wishing everyone a great weekend. Hope you had a good time lurking. He's our steady lurker. All right. All right, so let me go to a couple of questions that were mailed in. All right. All right, so we had a question last week on how to do like an explode voices. That was kind of like a previous scoring function that was in Cubase 13, and now it's kind of a different function or different approach to do it inside of Cubase 14 with the new score editor. And I wanted to kind of take it another step further. So what we could do is when we go to and let's say we have our MIDI events here like this. So we have our chords, and the intention is to take these chords and to take each of these and split them to different voices. So often like what they call an SATB, soprano, alto, tenor, bass, from high to low. So that's what these voices would do. All right. So to do this, one of the things we want to do is on this particular track, we're going to go and we look at the chords. We want to set these chords here to voicings. Okay, so we'll just come over here, and now when we select like the top voice here, we can see that will be soprano. If we select the voice below, it's going to be set as alto. The voice below that in the next chord, tenor, and so we have bass. So as we kind of look at our voices here, we'll see this split as soprano, alto, tenor, bass. Okay. Now there's a new logical editor, and I was kind of close to figuring it out last time, but I was probably having a brain cramp. So let's go to our logical editor. And what we can do is say we want to extract to track, and we're going to say type is equal to note. So if you just hit insert, and then under context variable, we want to choose equal to the voice of bass. So we could save presets. We're going to extract bass from voice. We're going to switch this to tenor and extract tenor to voice. And we want to extract the alto. We want to extract the soprano, whatever we want to do. And we can make, now that we've made 3 separate presets or 4 separate presets for soprano, alto, for soprano, alto, tenor, or bass, and save them as presets, we're going to make a macro. So let's come over here. We'll go to edit, to the key commands, and we want to make sure that the macros are visible. And we're going to make a new macro here. And for our commands, let me just come over here. We had a new macro already that I didn't name. All right, so we're going to say extract. So on this, I want to leave the soprano where it is. Let me just come over here, say voice. All right, and we're going to see, so I want to leave the soprano where it is. I'm going to make a macro to say we're going to extract the alto voice. So we're going to add that command. We're going to extract the tenor voice to a separate track, and we're going to extract the bass to a separate track. Okay, so now when I come here, we'll see that we have one part with 4 voices. And now let's run the macro. And now each of the voices is on a separate track here. So let me just move this groove agent track out of the way so it's not at the top. So now we could see that we have the soprano, alto, tenor, and bass voices all here. Now I wanted to take it a step further in my macro and add the names for each of the voices for these, so that when we extract it, that we can say, like our name, and we'll say soprano, like in parenthesis. the next voice will be called alto in parenthesis, tenor in parenthesis, bass. So I came over and made a project logical editor. And when we go to the setup, we could say we're going to transform the selected track, and the property is set to selected. So we're going to take the selected track and we're going to go in the action target and choose name. We're going to append. And what I did is I put a space and then parenthesis bass and end parenthesis. And I did this for append name bass, append alto. So it's really just changing that one word and saving it as a preset. So then I created another macro. So I created 4 logical editor presets to save the soprano, alto, tenor, bass. I've created 4 presets to name the selected track to append soprano, alto, tenor, bass to the name of the selected track. And now we want to put these into kind of a macro to assign all those different commands. So we're going to go to our key commands here, and we'll say, okay, let's go to our explode voices. And so I think if we come over here, so what we're going to do is to, let me just see if this is the right order. Okay, so we're going to extract the alto. So we have this 4-part harmony here. We're going to extract the alto, tenor, and bass voice. Then we're going to name the existing track soprano. We're going to append the name soprano. We're going to go down 1 track. So we're going to navigate down, name the next track alto, go down, name the next track tenor, and then name the next track bass. So if I run this macro now, I could just hit 1 button, and now when we look at it, the tracks here, we'll see that the chords soprano, chords alto, tenor, and bass. So those names have automatically been added, so we know exactly which voice is on the particular track. So if we were to kind of look at all the steps of this, so again, we want to do the logical preset. So again, we go to the MIDI logical editor, and this would be where we're going to extract to track, type is equal to none, or to note rather, and then we'll choose our context variables equal to voice, bass, soprano, alto, tenor. And then for the project logical editor, we just kind of come over here. We want to transform the selected track and name it, and I put a space so that the name doesn't come immediately right after, like you know, in the same word, and I just put a parenthesis for or a bracket for alto, for tenor, bass, save those as presets. And this is after taking the part and just, you know, assigning the voices from the chord area. So once that's done, run the macro, and when we come right over here, everything is now automatically split and named correctly. So that's how you could do it, and this is a macro for that. So let me open up in case people want to take a look at the screens to make these. Let's go to our project logical editor, so you can pause the screen if you need to make these particular settings. So let's that should be all you need to do to kind of mimic the explode chord, and then you could trigger a MIDI remote or a key command to trigger that particular macro. All right, let's see if there's more questions that popped in. Thanks for all the great questions from everyone. If you've learned a new tip or trick, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. All right. Okay. All right, so we see channel ripoff just saying, hey Greg, it's just saying TGIF, brother North, Georgia says hi. So thanks for joining us. All right, so Best Korean Jesus says, back to trying to make music again. Good luck with your projects. All right, we see that Bratman Studio Rick has lots of old hardware echoes, so they all kind of have their different flavors. And he also has the Alesis wedge tabletop. Yeah, so I still have a wedge that I bought for $99 when they were blowing them out, so it's kind of an underrated reverb. All right, so Gerald Ely says the explode voices macro is useful. I'll have to rerun that part of the stream a couple times. Yeah. All right, and we had another question. Let's get to that. That was mailed in. All right. Okay, so you see, hi Greg, recently I was playing with this full version of Groove Agent. I loaded the kit and then loaded the preset, an acoustic adventure. It's the first one. I clicked on the pattern that says main 3, and it's assigned to C#0, and it's the second one in the second row. So let's go ahead and just open that up so we could see it in action here. So let's go to our Groove Agent. So we have the kit loaded up here. And when we go to the pattern, this is the pattern. Okay. So, and it's assigned to C#. It's the second one. It says when you play it, it kind of has a swing to it. So then I dragged it into the project window onto the Groove Agent track, and all the swing disappeared. It sounded completely different and stiff. I thought that maybe the auto quantize was messing it up, so I turned that off, but no difference. No matter what I do, when I drag it out to the project, the pattern changes to something yucky. Any idea what might be happening here? Thanks. All right, so there's one setting that you're probably one mouse click away from happiness with this. All right, so when we come over here, so we listen to the pattern. So nice little groove there. All right, so now I'm going to drag this to the Groove Agent track. All right, so we're going to drag that pattern out. All right, and now we're going to play from here and listen to it. All right, so it sounds much different. So the trick is before you drag it out, you'll see this little omni button here. Turn that on. And now when we drag that pattern out, and so now we listen to it, and all right, so what's happening is sometimes you'll have, MIDI notes that are used for the patterns and MIDI notes that are used for triggering samples. And if you have lots of samples, there's only 128 MIDI notes. So at times, the MIDI notes may overlap with the number of patterns that are available in a particular instrument. So that's why you want to enable omni mode, and that will give a port for the patterns and a separate MIDI port for just the notes. So if you just this one mouse click right here, do that and then drag it out, I think it'll sound exactly as you expect. So give that a try. All right, that's our last mailed in question. Let's go back to our live. All right, wonderful to see Randy from Dallas-Fort Worth area from Radar the band. And he's already received 1 gallon of banana nut ice cream from his buddy Michael Teams. All right. All right, Eonic Scruzz asks, hey Greg Undo, just bought a Bluetooth speaker. How do I make the sound come towards on Cubase? It's an Altec speaker. All right, so sometimes you want to make sure, so I'm not sure if you're running Mac or Windows. Sometimes Bluetooth, I think, is only limited to 44.1, so make sure, that your project is at the sample rate that Bluetooth works at. So, if you're doing 96K, I think it's 44.1. I could be mistaken. But if your project's at 48K, it may not work. But what you need to do is to come over to your studio menu, to your studio setup. We can choose kind of the built-in audio driver if you're on Mac, or the Steinberg built-in. So if we come over here, let's say I switch to my built-in audio interface. At that point, what we need to do is to, so when we do this, or you'll see a Steinberg built-in Asio driver if you're on Windows. And what that does is it allows you to kind of go from the Asio that generally is utilized for low latency operation. It'll go from Asio directly to the onboard, like the computer audio system sounds. Now, your computer audio, it may output audio over HDMI. It may output audio over like the built-in audio output, or built-in speakers on your laptop. So this audio source can go to multiple destinations. But what you need to do is to go to the control panel, and at this point, you'll see like the different devices that are available. So if I don't think I have a Bluetooth device handy here, but it would show up here, and you want to, and this would look a little bit different on the Windows platform, but how you get there is the same. And you need to tell Cubase to output that the audio driver that you want to use for your computer's operating system, because probably your Bluetooth device doesn't have an Asio driver. You want to route the audio out to the Bluetooth as opposed to built-in speakers, as opposed to HDMI, as opposed to other choices. Then once you have that selected here, so if you're on Windows, on Apple, on Mac OS, you go to built-in audio to control panel, and choose the output device there. If you're on Windows, you would probably choose the Steinberg built-in, which goes into your computer's operating system. Go to the control panel and remap directly from there, and then it will work. But realize that you're going to have latency, so every time you play, it could be like 40 milliseconds of latency just on the playback. So just be aware of that. So it's not, while it's convenient, it's not as practical for DAW usage than traditional speakers. So, all right. Let me just switch this back to... All right. So we see Val is checking out from Vienna. All right. So we see Rick from Bratman Studio. Hey, Greg, looking at Groove Agent, can I get a quick explanation of the circle with different parts to create songs? Don't get it, maybe a demo. Thanks, never used that. Maybe I should. All right, so let's take a look. All right, so is it this circle here? All right, so if we're dealing with this circle here, and let's say we're on our pattern. So if we have kind of two different tabs in which we can toggle back and forth by hitting the letter E. All right, so if we're in this circle here, what this is going to allow us to do is, so let's say we'll play this pattern. So, and we have different color patterns. The greens are intros. So we have like two intros. We have endings. And we'll have the blue buttons, the blue pads here are fills. Right, and now we have these yellow pads. Now these yellow pads are pattern pads. So let's say I'm playing this pattern that was used in the previous example. All right, now what we could do is say, okay, I want it to, we see this kind of XY axis, and we could right click and do MIDI learn. I could adjust the dynamics. And you could hear kind of the different layers of samples here. So it's not just the same sample, it's playing softer. It's actually different samples. And then if we go to the right, so vertical, or vertical plane, adjust the dynamics. And if we go horizontally, this will adjust the complexity. So each of the yellow pads, we have 16 levels of complexity. So I have a very simple pattern. I could also come over here and just slide over, and we could add more complexity as we go over to the right. And we have different options here where we can say auto complexity. So we can say, okay, every bar, and it will go 1 or 2 levels of complexity up or down. So it's not playing the same pattern over and over again. So let's say if I want to come over here, we can say every 4 bars do a random drum fill. All right, so we are 4 bars now, and so we could just have it do autofills. We can also just come over here and choose if we only want to crash at the fill or ending. So every time it plays back, it's not going to play the same crash sound. We could also choose, okay, where I want the hi-hat to be at the tip or the shank. And a lot of them will also kind of have like a halftime feel. So we could have just a lot of complexity. So you could kind of start off with a very basic pattern here and say, okay, I'm writing my song with this groove. And then, okay, I want to just come over here and just say, okay, when we get to the bridge, I want a little more complexity, or when we're in the breakdown, I want the drums to be very quiet, and you could just automate these changes. So you can start off with the basic premise of a drum part, write your song to that, and then do the tweaks that a real drummer would naturally do. So for each of these yellow patterns, we have all these different variations that are available to use, in addition to our beginnings, endings, and fills. So you could get a lot of great drum stuff just using this and coming up with kind of natural things that a drummer would do. so that you don't have the same repeated pattern over and over and over again. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Rick. All right, see Gareth is getting ready for bed. It's late in Spain. All right, so we see Bratman Studio says yes. All right, so we see Millard Brown says Greg posted a question about key commands above. It may have scrolled past you, so let me see if I can find it, but feel free to ask it again. Sorry if I missed it. I'll scroll up just a little bit. But it seems like YouTube's been kind of maybe eating some questions today. If anyone else sees it, I just see at 3:41 p.m. Eastern that says, "Hi Greg and Cubase family, hope you're doing well." And then I don't see the other question. Or if you wanted to post it, some people have been posting it into the Jazz Dude mentioned our people, their questions were getting eaten. But if you want to post it in the Cubase Nation Discord or try asking it again, I'd be happy to go over it. But I don't see it listed. If anyone else sees it, please feel free to copy and paste. All right. So we see Eonic Scruzz just says, have you ever heard or own an Altec Bluetooth speaker? Said I haven't. I'm not that familiar with it. And I know Altec is kind of a, an audio company from the 50s and 60s. I'm not sure if they're the same. Probably not. All right, so we see just another question while we're here. It says from so it says what's the dot in the middle that can play like verse, chorus, bridge, etc. So what these do here is, as we move, this will be our style parts. So we could just come over here, our styles. We could switch to like fills. Intros, endings. So if you have some of the kits in the full version of Groove Agent, will have additional, can have, when Groove Agent SE, there's 16 pattern pads, but you have 128. So some of the pattern pads here, we can, you could have, instead of 2 intros, 2 endings, but these just allow you to just kind of switch between the endings and the different patterns here. So you have like your different pattern groups, you have your endings. So this just allows you to kind of navigate what you are clicking on by the pad. So as we click on our pads, we can see that those will automatically update exactly to what we're doing here. And then if we go to so that's just kind of more of a visual representation of what's going on with the actual pads. All right. Okay, so we see Millard Brown's question says, just looking for an easy way to print a list of key commands without opening the keycommands.xml in Excel. So let me just see if we come over. I think Jazz Dude has a site that you might be able to copy. That's a list of like the built-in key commands. But if we come over here to the assigned, let me just see. And let me just make sure. All right, just reread it. print a list of key commands without opening key commands.xml in Excel. Yeah, so I think that Jazz Dude has a link, and he'll probably share it. Yeah, I think he just shared it. He's that good. He's awesome. But so check that out, and that might be the link that is probably in a digital format that you don't have to do all sorts of Excel extraction and stuff. All right. So we see from Paul D. He says, hi, Greg. What's the best way to see what MIDI data a VST instrument is sending when it's being controlled internally via the plugin GUI, not the data it normally sees from the keyboard? Okay, so let's say if you want to come over, a lot of instruments, VST3 has this capability, not that all the instruments support it, but if we come over, let's say to Retrolog here, if we want to see, to access that, okay, to see what MIDI data. So a lot of times, these may not be, these may not be like traditional MIDI data, but if we wanted to control it, we could just say learn CC and then move a CC parameter and then automatically control the parameter there. You could also just kind of come over here and say if you want to show that as an automation, so it's not necessarily what the MIDI data is, but sometimes it's not necessarily spitting out MIDI data. It may respond to MIDI data, but moving the knob in a VSTi may not transmit MIDI data. But if you wanted to just click right there on the right, I could now just open up the automation lane and see, and now as we play, we could see that that automation will automatically be for that one parameter. If I come here, let's show the automation lane of that. So now we can see that those two parameters here and here will be automated together, but sometimes that's not, a VSTi isn't necessarily transmitting that as MIDI because it's not sending it out to any other device, but that parameter can be controlled through automation. So a lot of times, instrument parameters don't transmit MIDI. A lot of times hardware, controllers will do that because that's how it's captured in the sequencer. But since all the information is already in the DAW, it's not like people are going to use this to control a different parameter on a different instrument per se, because you would just grab it by the mouse and control, or use a controller too. So it may not actually be MIDI data that's actually being sent out from that parameter. Let me know if that makes sense or if I'm completely misunderstanding. All right, we see Best Green Jesus says he'll have a question for the next live stream. He's going to try to figure it out first. You could always ask now if you want. So, all right, Gerald Ely just asking, can you automate the dial in Groove Agent? So, yeah, I believe so. So, let's come over here. So, we'll go ahead and play a little bit here. All right, so let's put this into automation. All right. And now we'll all right, so let's play back now. And say while it's playing. To see all the automation written in. So if we want to, sorry, it's getting annoying. All right. So here you could So yeah, at that point you can just simply automate those parameters right there. All right. I see John Koskian just says thanks to Greg, Jazz Dude, and Jan, and everyone. So thanks for joining us and being such a loyal attendee and part of the community. All right. Eonic Scruz just says, Greg Undo, how do you find where your directories for different VSTs are located? So VST3s are going to be fixed locations. And you could, if you go to the VST plugin manager, and it's one of the things, VST3 does that VST3, VST2 could be installed anywhere, and Native Instruments would install their plugins in this folder, Arturia in this folder, Waves in this folder, UAD in this folder. So it could be messy, but if we just want to come over, we could say, okay, let's select a particular plugin, and then you could actually, see like where your third-party plugin is installed to. So generally it's going to be on Mac OS. I see Jazdu posted it on the Windows platform, but on Mac OS it's going to be your library, audio plugins, VST3, and in that folder. So you don't have to go hunting. Now, if you do have a VST2 plugin, you could go to the VST plugin manager, and then you'll see I'm on Apple Silicon, so there's no VST2, but you could have a VST2 plugin paths. So with VST3, everything is placed into one single folder location. All right. All right, we see Miller Brown just saying thanks to Jazz Dude and everyone for all their help. All right, we'll see if there's any more questions. All right, so I think we are out of questions. I want to thank everyone for all of the wonderful questions that everyone's asked today. We'll give it another 30 seconds or so, see if any other questions come in. Hope that everyone has learned a new tip or trick, and will use it in making music over the weekend and working on some great creativity. Again, we do these live streams on Tuesdays and Fridays starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. We usually go for about 4 hours, or until we run out of questions. So we'll see. All right, so we see from Bratman Studio, just a quick question. Says, Greg, did the VST3 update themselves, or do we have to check every once in a while? So if it's a Steinberg plugin, generally, when you update Cubase, if there's anything of the internal plugins that need to be updated, it will be updated within the particular application. When you do like an update from 1402 to 1403, stuff like that. Other companies, you may have to manually check. So, if you check your hub, you can see like as new versions are released, so that you're aware of it. All right, so we see from Eonic Scruz, this Greg Undo, you're the best. I'm trying to be as good as everyone else that's here on the live stream. Try to represent the Steinberg products well. All right, we see Arts Knows Love just says, thank you, Greg. Be safe, everyone. All right, and Arts Knows Love wants everyone to hit the thumbs up, like button, and subscribe if you haven't done that. And all right, so we see from Gerald Ely, just kind words, says, great job, Greg. Thank you for all that you do. Greg, everyone have a great weekend. Hopefully I'll see you next week. So we hope to see you on the live streams next weekend as well, next week. All right, we'll give it another 30 seconds, see if there's any other questions. If not, we'll wrap up just a little bit early, so everyone could get a start on their weekend. And if you're in the northern hemisphere, you could enjoy the summer. Hopefully it's not too hot or raining. right. See, just Soren just says thanks, Greg. All right. All right, so it looks like we are out of questions. I want to thank again everyone for having such a wonderful community here. I feel privileged to be able to help people along their journey, and want everyone to stay safe and healthy over the weekend so that we can answer more questions and learn more stuff about Cubase and other Steinberg products. And with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. Everyone, please, and we'll see everyone back on Tuesday. Take care and goodbye.